Hello out there, Comic-Con International crowd, and welcome to our panel. We can be heroes, saving the world in our best way. I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, aka Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher at Illinois State University, as well as producer of the Dark Loops Productions channel on YouTube. And joining me in today's discussion is an illustrious group of psychologists and comic creators, all of whom are proud and loud enthusiasts of all things geekdom. Panelists, please introduce yourselves. Tell us a little something about who you are, as well as the topic you've chosen to discuss today. And we'll start with Vanessa.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. My name is Dr. Vanessa Hintz, licensed clinical psychologist here in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin area. Proud and loud geek enthusiast, geek therapist. And today I am privileged to share the story of Eric Killmonger with you all from a racial trauma lens. So get ready. I'm excited.
Fantastic, fantastic. How about you, Victor?
I'm Victor Dandridge, the hardest working man in comics. I'm a self-publishing comic creator from Columbus, Ohio, and it's my absolute privilege to be a part of this conversation. What I'm going to talk about is the thin line between protagonist and antagonist that we really have to examine to figure out who even counts as being a hero these days.
That's fantastic. Can't wait to hear all that. And how about you, Leandra?
Thanks. So I'm Dr. Leandra Paris. I'm a school psychologist, and I am an assistant professor and program coordinator at William and Mary out here in Virginia. And I do a lot of work on trauma-informed care in schools and equity-centered education. And today I'm going to be talking to you about Deadpool. Why do we have to be so serious? And what is reality?
Okay, so I'm in, right? What is reality? So to start things off, pop god David Bowie famously said, "We can be heroes if just for one day."
Right.
To begin our panel, like I said, we're going to look at a few studies and see what we think heroes might be. So research on what is heroism has indicated that most definitions tend to take on three characteristics. One is it occurs in the context of an atypical situation, such as a natural disaster or a situation where one is physically threatened. Two, it's seen as being unusual, in part because of the significant personal risks involved in performing that behavior. And three, it's aimed at furthering the welfare of others.
Genocide studies literature. Rescuers share these characteristics. One, a deep sense of empathy, feeling for everyone else. Number two, a universalistic, that's a good word, worldview. And three, prior exposure to models of moral behavior. By defining the threshold of the intolerable as exactly the same for everybody, the rescuer includes the needs of strangers within his or her moral universe of obligation.
What I love about that is that third point, prior exposure to models of moral behavior, right? And I'm sure that that's going to come up as we talk about our characters and their struggles.
Absolutely.
Struggles with heroism. Fantastic. Leandra.
Yeah, so we also want to look at bravery and caring. So in a study that looked at personality profiles of about 50 people who actually had awards and were recognized by their peers for being exceptionally brave or caring, what they found was that they had a stronger motivation for themes of both agency and communion, so being together and also having agency, were more likely to see redemption in critical life events, and reported being more securely attached to others, which is going to be super interesting later.
Oh my gosh. And even that second point, right? That those who are bravery or brave or caring have this, see it as a redemptive act. We see that a lot of movies where they did some crap earlier in life and now they're trying to make good.
Now they got to make good for it.
Okay, so then if we think more specifically about morality in the context of culture, we can think about this in two different ways. So first being individualizing moralities that focus primarily on the extension and protection of individual rights. And the main threats are attacks of violence and oppression. And child, I could talk about oppression all day. Okay, so get ready. And second being binding moralities, which focus more so on the promotion and protection of social groups and institutions. And the main threats here are attacks from other groups, traitors, and free riders within the group. Very interesting. So this then lends itself to this sort of multicultural paradox in that any form of education aimed at making people members of a flourishing moral community could actually promote fidelity to group norms that dissuade and punish heroic behavior that bucks these norms. Very, very interesting.
Yes,
I love a good paradox.
A lot of rich space in there. So we're going to go ahead and start here, and we'll go ahead and start with Vanessa.
This is as close as I'm ever going to be to Michael B. Jordan. I'm like, very.
You don't know that. You don't know that.
Oh, I don't.
That's all I'm saying.
Someone put that in the universe for me that I'm
Life is open
to him. So yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about Eric Killmonger. And this is going to focus more so on the film adaptation, although I invite anybody here on the panel with me or out there in virtual world to think also about comic representations of the character. And so I told y'all this is the closest. Let me look at him. Just am I looking at him?
You are too. That's so on point. So on point.
This might be the closest I'll ever be. So this is, I'm not gonna go through this because I think, you know, this is probably well known to most folks that are listening to us, but this is just sort of what we're gonna take when we contextualize the character of Killmonger today. These are the things we're gonna take to be his truths. I know that they may have been, you know, the same or different in different iterations of the characters, but these are the things that we're going to take as his truths, which I think, again, come more so from the film adaptation of the characters. So again, being someone who is Wakandan, living in America, raised as an African-American is going to be very important to the context of our discussion. And really, again, just on this sort of like revenge quest throughout the entirety of the film and in the comics as well. So what I want to talk to you all about specifically that I think are going to help to frame this understanding of sort of Killmonger's plight and his trauma, which I'm going to talk about, because my argument is that Killmonger is reacting to a trauma that was chronic and pervasive, and that was sort of inflicted upon him basically because of who he is, not because of what he's done. And so instead of asking about Killmonger why he is the way he is, I think we should more so be asking what happened to him, which Leandra knows. That's the tagline for trauma-informed care, which we'll talk about for sure. But I know you can't see my mouse, but I'm going to start in the square that says conformity. And basically what I'm going to describe very briefly are these different stages of minority identity development. So arguably, anybody who identifies as a racial or ethnic minority, arguably, goes through these different stages as they're sort of coming into their own to understand what it means to be a racial or ethnic minority. So the first stage is conformity. I'm sorry. Let me also add that this is an American notion.
There you go.
I would not. This
right.
is Americanized. So this first stage of conformity is when racial and ethnic minorities really align more so with majority cultural values, which in our country are white norms. And so there's a lot of internalized racism that's happening at this stage. People just, you know, feel like they don't really love the skin that they're in. Then they sort of idealize white people, white norms, white values, all these things, right? And what happens is there's some sort of event that pushes people into a state of dissonance, which is really questioning those beliefs that they had. And so I think a really prevalent example of this is what we saw during the summer of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd. You know, a lot of people really, for the first time, understood that people are treated differently in America because of racial, you know, characteristics. You know, racism is still alive and well. And so in this dissonance stage, people really start to question, you know, like, what, hold up, like is white the right way to go? I don't know. And what happens after that is sort of like the pendulum swings all the way to the other end. So people move into this stage of resistance and immersion, which is essentially where you want to be surrounded by people who look like you and no one else. So in this sense, which is what we see from Killmonger often in the film, is I want everybody who looks like me, and anybody else can just go away, or we can kill them with vibranium, you know, whatever we need to do, but they can just go away. And ultimately what then happens is you get pushed into another stage of reflection where you recognize that, you know, okay, all white people aren't terrible. Maybe just some, not all. We don't have to throw them all away. I don't have to be so insular. I don't have to self-segregate in this way. And then lastly, ultimately, and again, I use this loosely, but the sort of ultimate stage is getting to this place of integrative awareness where you feel like you can simultaneously hold, I'm a person of color, I'm different, I'm treated differently, and that's not fair. And it's not every white person's fault. Racism is a system. It's not an individual, it's a system. And so those are the stages of minority identity development. And why I choose to sort of outline this in the context of Killmonger is that I think particularly in the film, we see him very deeply rooted in that resistance and immersion stage, because again, as soon as he comes to Wakanda, he's like, I want the throne, and now we're going to use all these weapons to kill all the people who have oppressed us. That scene in the throne room with him and T'Challa is an amazing scene because of all the things that he was saying. Like, you know, as a Black person watching that film, I was like, he ain't lying. You know what I'm saying? And the things that he was saying. And so again, I think that, and rest in heaven to the great Chadwick Boseman, I think that, again, you see, because of the way I think Michael B. Jordan portrayed the character, we see at so many instances, you know, his trauma, not only just the trauma of finding his father dead, you know, but the trauma of being a Black person in America. Because I think that all of these sort of racial identity statuses, whatever you want to call them, there is an overlay of racism inherent in all of these. So in that conformity stage, we have internalized racism. In resistance and immersion, I have the anger and rage that bubbles up from a lifetime of oppression. And then the hope, again, is that in the integrative awareness stage, we get to this place where we understand that it's all of our responsibilities to eradicate racism and really, you know, make a world that's more equitable and just. And so, again, I think we see that pain very clearly with Killmonger in sort of all of his actions and what he's doing. We see a similar pain with T'Challa, but it's not rooted in oppression like that of Killmonger, because T'Challa is a royal prince/king in a sovereign African nation. He didn't have to deal with like systemic racism and oppression.
Right.
You're a royal person in a sovereign African nation. And so again, I think that instead of looking at this juxtaposition as good versus evil, hero versus villain, I think it's traumatized person and less traumatized person, because I think they both have their own individual traumas, but we see how Killmonger, his trauma really just seeps into his core. And I don't say this in a negative way. I don't think that it's a negative at all. I think it was not cool what he wanted to do. I think that I can understand, and I think a lot of people of color could understand what it feels like to get to that place. And which is why I don't think that he is at all a villain. I actually think he is somewhat of a, dare I say, I don't know if it's an anti-hero, because I don't know. I don't know what I would call it. Friends? What would you call it?
if I can give you your roses, first and foremost, the subject of your conversation and representing Killmonger through it is so on point, because literally through that breakdown of that cycle, you literally told the story of Killmonger in the Black Panther movie. In terms of conformity, he is growing up as an African-American child. He is not garbed in typical Wakandan fare. The closest thing that he has to being shown as Wakandan, we don't even see till later when he shows his lip, and you realize like, oh snap, you've been given some aspects of it, but otherwise there's so much. Listen, when he calls Zuri Uncle James, that is a cultural conformative move, because that's how he related to him. That's how he was told. Like, I got to give you your roses on that one. You literally broke down everything, even to the point where post his death, the what's the top of the circle? What's that called again?
Oh, integrative awareness.
So it's T'Challa that actually integrates in honor of what Killmonger said. Like that's fire. That is absolute fire. And a phrase that I've heard on the radio a million times, and I say it a lot, and you're exhibiting this right now with this conversation: hurt people hurt people. That's the truth. When you're getting into the question of why Killmonger has done this, you do have to ask the question, what happened to him? You know, and you know, you see how deeply he involved himself in so many different things. In terms of dissonance, he joins the American military system. Like, you couldn't be further from Wakanda at that point. You know, like, amazing, great concept there. Yeah, you already know. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I love it. I think too, the dissonance that Killmonger brings to T'Challa is really important for his own integrated awareness. Like Killmonger is the event that causes him to go through that process, which I think makes him a greater hero. And there's something to be said for the people who help us be better heroes. And I would say that Killmonger is a hero. Like, there are people around the world that, had he succeeded, would have had a better life. You know what I mean? And I think that it's a matter of a hero for whom. And I think that's really where I come back. When you were talking, I was just kind of like, you know, maybe we can't like agree on the whole, like, you know, kick everyone out with vibranium and like, you know, he's clearly set out to be the villain, but like, you know, even in the theater when he says, you know, bury me in the ocean with my ancestors who jumped ship, like that's a rally call that I think a lot of people can get behind and do get behind. And that's a very real space, probably one of the realest spaces that I've seen in the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
And so I would say that Killmonger, if there are people who can't agree that he is a hero for some, you can't agree that he provided what T'Challa needed to be a real hero and then come back and actually open the walls of Wakanda and say, let us share, let us help. I love it. You know, I love it. It's good.
Do you think that he actually would have enacted the plan as he said he would have? Do you think that that's actually what he would have done?
Well, he could have had a whole arc of getting into warfare and then seeing the disastrous outcome. And fortunately for people, T'Challa brought that vibe to him instead of all the destruction.
Right.
But yeah, people do look at the outcomes of things they didn't predict. Like what I want to say about this movie is that I think what I love about it is the whole Killmonger T'Challa thing actually challenges the idea that we can define heroism. I mean, in any non-contextual way. This is why when I watched What If, and I'll be honest here, The Watcher came out at the very beginning of the episode. What if Killmonger saved Tony Stark? And The Watcher called Killmonger a villain. A villain gets another chance. And I thought, wait, didn't you check with those other writers? Because that's not what they were doing.
Exactly.
And so I was a little surprised that there wasn't that cross-reference going on, because I agree with you, Leandra. There's a constituency. My friend, Dr. Stanford Carpenter, always says, who's the constituency of this power? And the contradiction between the binding morality and the individualizing morality of the two characters just really was rich. And it really challenges the idea of one definition of heroism.
And I think, and again, I'm naturally cynical, so but I think that, you know, the Watcher categorizing Killmonger as a villain is exactly what society does to traumatize Black people all the time. And so I think even the way, you know, in the film, you kind of, again, see that, because I think that's a great question to pose in terms of like, would he have carried this plan out? I think that either way, I wouldn't have been surprised, because again, that's what we see with, you know, Black youth and other people of color who have been historically marginalized. Sometimes we see post-traumatic growth. We see people resilience that, you know, we are often championing that resilience that we see it all the time. Black excellence is real, just like Black trauma is real. And sometimes Black trauma, we can't overcome those circumstances, and not because there's anything wrong with us, but because there are circumstances that, you know, we're operating from a deficit resource wise. And so I think that, again, even the way that people, like, do people put, and when I say people, I mean all people, because again, I definitely put Killmonger on the same, like with Thanos, in terms of like them and the Joker, I would argue too, but them, they saying stuff that make a little bit of sense.
They really are. They really
like,
are.
I don't know.
Exactly.
But I think that I don't know how many people put Killmonger in that category. And again, I'm obviously biased because I'm Black and Michael B. Jordan, but you know what I'm saying? Outside of that, like, I would, or anyone who is having, you know, hesitation about putting him in that category with them, I would ask why. And again, not in a judgy way, but just more so because, again, to that end, and I think it was something that Leandra said, you know, what happened to Killmonger was, I think, such a tragic reflection of what happens to so many people of color who, you know, may be misguided, is that gets attributed to a negative characteristic of their person and not a social commentary on their circumstances. So he can't be a hero because he did those bad things because he's a bad person. Whereas I would argue he is a person that bad things happen to, and he is trying to get whatever need met that he needs. And I think that need that he's trying to get met is love and adoration, and something that he didn't get as a child.
The system will reap what it sows. And if you were a white Robin Hood, the story would be different. and we'd be rooting for him, and he'd be a hero.
Historically true. Historically
And
true.
on that note, we shall now move to Leandra.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you today about Deadpool. I think he's a fun character. I want to be really clear, though, that I am talking about Deadpool from the comics. I think that Deadpool in the movies has been given a bit of attachment to characters that root him and make it easier to see him as a hero. So I want to talk more about Deadpool as he's portrayed in the comics. And so first, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about who Deadpool is. He is the fourth wall breaking genius and trickster. And one of the things that I really love about this particular sort of frame that I have up is that Deadpool is talking to us as the audience, and he's telling us that this is all for your entertainment. And I know something that the rest of the characters don't. They don't understand me, but I see you, and I'm glad this is entertaining you, but it's not funny. He even mentions that this is what will make him have depression endlessly. And so I want to make it clear here that there's a lot of things that Deadpool does that, he's a mercenary, he's paid to kill people, he has no problem killing people, which comes up a lot as a point of contention with his other Avenger members. And so what we forget sometimes, though, is that he has what we would, I don't want to say mental illness, but it comes off that way. He sees things that aren't there. He's often shown as having two different voices that are talking to him. He understands more about reality than other people around him, or at least in a different way. He just happens to be right. So there's a lot of things about him that I think put him in a situation where he's constantly in pain physically, depending on the origin story that you go with. He's constantly battling a reality that may or may not be real for him or other people. And so what do you do with that when you live in this world where there really are no rules? You have all this control, but you don't, because you're being written. And I think that's a really important space to be in when you start to look at sort of fatalism and nihilism, which often drives what Deadpool is doing. So what happens with Deadpool often is that he does find, like so many people who struggle with reality and multiple realities, as he finds an anchor, and the anchor that he finds is Captain America. He has, I would say, an over attachment to Captain America. We go back to that hero definition and we talk about attachment. He is very distant and insecure with most people and overly drawn to Captain America because he sees him as the definition of hero. He sees Captain America as, being the epitome of everything that heroes are, and that's what he's trying to do. And so when Captain America brings him in, he's very, very excited about it. Best day of his life, right? Kind of gives him the push to try to get things together. So much so that when Captain America orders him to kill Coulson, and then eventually a lot of the other Avengers, he does so without questioning it. Because to him, well, he's the hero. He's the one who does everything right. And he's using other people as a guiding force for what's right and wrong. And in this situation happens to be wrong. In fact, he gets so mad at Captain America for this that it leads to one of the most epic battles in Marvel history, because he finally realizes, like, I trusted you to help me do the right thing, which is not necessarily the heroic thing to do, but I do think that it's important for us to think about when we think about Deadpool's moral compass and what drives his actions. So that obviously messes with Deadpool's head, by the way. Don't meet your heroes kind of thing, literally. And so we start to see in a lot of different comic books is him really grappling with what I think we were thinking about today in terms of, like, what is a hero? Like, how do I become a hero? And he asked Captain America that, like, how do you do the right thing? How do you always make the right choices? He's actually really introspective. I don't know how many heroes take a step back and say, like, how do I know that I'm doing the right thing? And Captain America's got kind of flippant and is like, I guess I just don't see any other alternative, which, going back to my first slide, he sees all of the alternatives. He knows that there's a ton of other places to go. At one point, he tells Spider-Man, I know you won't kill me because they can't ruin your character. That would be too off character for you. Like, so when you look at that and someone says, well, you just don't see any other alternative, but you are someone who sees all these other realities and all these other choices, and you're also mentally in pain and trauma all the time, constantly, I think that makes those lines a little blurred. And so we see this really great arc where Deadpool actually starts hanging out with Spider-Man, which, as you guys know, great friendship, little buddy cop thing. And he tells him, he's learned, like, this is a hero status is something that's earned. It's not something that I can just do the right thing or make the right choices. And I thought by hanging out with you, that might rub off on me a little bit. Right. And so again, he's still letting someone else define for him what's right or wrong, but at least he's acknowledging I have to earn the right to be called a hero. And then of course ruins it by flying off the thing because he's very funny and he does not take life too seriously, because why would you if everything isn't real? But again, it's a whole nother thing. And so I wanted to point out that while Deadpool may not be the traditional hero, he definitely has some attachment issues, going back to that definition. And he's definitely more individualistic and out for himself. There are times where he shows that he is a hero for certain people, kind of going back to what we said before with Vanessa's talk, a hero for whom. And 2 examples. So the first one is he talks down Danielle from jumping off a bridge or a building, sorry. He of course makes fun of her the entire time, but he sees someone in pain and he recognizes someone who's struggling with mental illness, who's struggling with a mental psychosocial problem. And he kind of says, like, what are you doing? And he makes a joke and he actually takes her out for this really wild and crazy night. But at the end of the night, recognizes that he's not the one to help her, that he's not the one who can do that, and actually takes her and checks her into the emergency room. And I bring this up as an example of true heroism because he does have enough empathy, going back to the definition, but he also has the awareness of when he's not the one. And I don't think we do that enough. I don't think we recognize sometimes when we're not the one, particularly as someone who's been a white therapist. Sometimes I'm not the one. As a straight therapist, I'm not the one. As a cisgender therapist, I'm not the one. And so recognizing we don't have to always be the hero. The heroic thing may be getting them to the person who can help them the most. And so I think Deadpool has that awareness that he doesn't get credit for a lot. I'm just going to put that out there, of when he can push, when he can stabilize, and then when he needs to get someone to someone else because he's not capable of providing that kind of help. The other example is children. I'm a school psychologist. I love kids. And so this is the one thing about Deadpool, that no matter what's going on, children are not to be messed with. That is his hard line. He will blow someone off. He will cut their head off. He will put a gun to their head. There are lots of stories where he's been in these really volatile situations. He's getting a lot of money, and he pisses off a lot of people because he will not kidnap a child. He will not hurt a kid. And a really good example is, it kind of comes down to like, do you kill baby Hitler, right? And so Phantasmo, I think I always forget who actually did it, but one of the X-Men / Avengers killed baby Apocalypse to prevent him from growing up and creating all that chaos and, Apocalypse. And Deadpool loses it. And he says it's not right. Like, he killed a kid. And Logan, Wolverine, is like, all you do is kill people for money. You're so bloodthirsty and you're so selfish and da da da. And he's like, yeah, but I would never kill a kid. And so I think, again, just showing how he really values the vulnerable. And I think there's something heroic about that. He's willing to take and kill innocent adults because they're adults and they found themselves in this situation, I guess. But kids are a no-go. And we see another good glimpse of this with his own daughter, where he is trying to be a better person. And again, like he does with Danielle, recognizes that he's not the one to raise her right now, and says that I'm going to keep her here where she's safe. And I'm going to try to get my stuff together, but I don't think I ever will. So I'm just doing my best. And I love at the end of this, he tells Spider-Man, I had a good day. And it goes back to David Bowie, like, we can be heroes even if for only a day. I made choices today. We do this a lot in reality therapy, where we talk about choices that we make and the reality that we're living in. And every day Deadpool wakes up and makes a choice. And sometimes it's a good day. Sometimes maybe it's not. And then again, he's like, I hope I passed your judgy test. Like, he always feels like people are judging him, which another paranoid schizophrenia kind of thing. But anyway, point is, Deadpool is living with a lot of trauma, a lot of mental health concerns, multiple realities that happen to be true for him. And he uses humor to deflect a lot of that. And I think people take that to mean that he's not serious, but humor is actually a really great way of coping. And he does, despite all of the horrible things he's done, it usually comes back to a black and white moral code that he sticks to. Captain America is good, so if he tells me to do something, then I do it. Or someone's vulnerable or they're a child, I don't cross that line. So he can be a hero for some people. And I'm going to end with the movie because the movie is good, but I will point out that it's so much easier to see him as a hero in the movie because they give him a very healthy, loving relationship. He has a very secure attachment to that person. And they turn him into more of like a chivalrous knight almost. Like he's a very true anti-hero who just kind of is a little not in touch with the reality that's being set up in that universe, but in touch with multiple realities. But I would say that if you're going back to the true Deadpool, it's much harder to make the argument given what all he does. But I do think, again, hurt people. And he's used humor to cope and people don't take him seriously, but he's a hero for kids and he's a hero for the vulnerable. So, and he's funny. We don't have to be so serious. Heroes do not need to be so serious all the time. I can't stand it.
You're right. No, that's really dope. Big
That
shout
was
out
really well done.
the Rick Remender Uncanny X-Force series where Phantom X does that. Huge moment for developing Deadpool specifically as a character with a line, not a character that you ever think would have one. And what I really like about what you pointed out is the two characters that he like looks to are almost spectrum dichotomies of what it means to be the best type of hero possible. Peter Parker and Steve Rogers are seemingly infallible in their heroic pursuits. Pete was this kid that just couldn't get a break. And Steve just wanted to do right, like all the time, period. And what's really cool is that Deadpool is not a person that exists on that spectrum, but he's aware of their spectrum. And that's what fascinates him. He can see it. He's like, that ain't me. But how do y'all get there? Like, how do y'all do this thing that y'all are clearly on that I can see? And I think that's one of those reality tracks that is really interesting for him to be aware of, comment on, but still have the self-awareness that that's not him. Super dope.
I think that's heroic too, being able to admit that we have this fallacy and that we aren't that person. And I think sometimes when we think about heroes, I love Captain America, but man, he's like a stick in the mud. He's so far up his moral code that he can't relax.
Yeah.
And then, so I there's a reason everyone flipped their lid when he turned out to be a sleeper soldier, right? Because it was antithetical to him. And so I just feel like there's something to be said for someone who can be a hero when it's needed and isn't so, who just sees the world has multiple perspectives and multiple realities for multiple people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think he gets that.
I really love the fact that they have used Captain America, who was written in a time of extreme white privilege, where you didn't have to really explain who his life was ignoring. He just wrote this white World War II superhero who has this pretty simple view of morality, and it always allows him to punch people. And then they just keep him that way. And they keep him that way. And then they keep putting all these other new superheroes up against him as a sort of examination of what we're doing. What is a hero, right? And what I love about what you said about Deadpool is this diversity in how we can help, right? Diversity and how we can be someone who is a hero for someone else, and to be able to do what you do and then say, but I'm not the person for this. We should be teaching that K through 12, right? How can you help and how can you not help? As a professor of psychology, we spend a lot of time teaching people how you cannot help, right? If you really want to help, this is what you have to do. And it takes a long time to be able to do it well. So I enjoyed sort of Deadpool as the flashlight, and the foil for what is a hero in the Marvel universe.
I was just gonna say that what I appreciate about what you said is, I think and I don't like Captain America at all. Now I do, because but
that's different.
Like the Steve Rogers Captain America, and I'm speaking, more specifically in the MCU, but it's boring. And I think Deadpool, not only, he's funny, but I think he provides a complexity that is representative of the beautiful complexity of human experience. But you think about Steve Rogers, like, even if we think about like Kohlberg's like morality development, like the further we get in our development of morality, the more ambiguous it gets. And so
Yes.
I think that Deadpool, there is a familiarity there, not just because he's funny and he's like, oh my God, like whatever, but because I think, I can be a Deadpool. I can't be a Steve Rogers because I'm just not that person. And I could be a Deadpool though, because I'm just a beautiful mess. You know what I'm saying? And I think that there's something comforting about that.
Yes.
Which is similar to what we were talking about with Killmonger. I think there's something comforting about knowing that even strong people feel that pain, the same pain that I'm feeling. You know what I'm saying? So I think with Deadpool, that's what I love about what you described. Is like that sort of, again, you talk about the diversity of help and just even like the complexity of our experience is gonna be, there's gonna be good days and bad days and everything in between. And he just so seamlessly like lives to the fullest in each of those different realities, experiences, whatever. And I think again, that's what we strive to do as humans, day to day.
So the character that I want to talk about who struggles with heroism or is an examination of heroism is Jessica Jones. And the reason I start with a picture of Jameson is because it's the patriarchy that Jessica Jones really finds herself working in and trying to find what it might be to be a hero. So here's this bit where she's interviewing to actually do a report for Jameson at the Bugle, because he can't stand suits, and he wants her to get into the suit world because he knows that she was there before, because actually she tried to be a superhero and tried to join the Avengers, and things went wrong. I'll talk about that in a bit. But here we see this great conversation between Jessica Jones and Jameson, where he's actually expressing the patriarchy. Hey, just get in there. We don't like those suits. You used to do that. You used to look pretty in the suit, just all this mess. And she's just biding her time, telling him, I don't think I can do that. And then eventually he makes her an offer. And she says, sure, I'll do it. There's the matter of an advance. So what she's doing is just making it clear that they're making a monetary exchange. And to get a little backstory on what brings her to this, she has a traditional origin story for a superhero. It's family oriented here in that she's on a family trip, and her brother and she and her brother are arguing in the back of the car. Needless to say, bad things happen in an accident and her family's killed. And because of a chemical released during the accident, she suddenly has these powers. So she tries to do the whole Barbie superhero thing, right? She does this character called Jewel, where she dresses as traditional female superheroes tend to be drawn. All of this is done on purpose in order to accentuate what she's trying to be and what she's trying to fight against. And for me, Jessica Jones represents a sort of struggle for agency in a space that doesn't want to grant it to you. And the Jessica Jones arc comes to fruition when she finally has her mind taken over by a guy named Kilgrave, or the Purple Man. And the Purple Man secretes a pheromone. And once you're in his presence and the pheromone takes you over, he can basically give you suggestions and you actually do the things he asks you to. And Kilgrave sort of tortured Jessica Jones by having her watch sex acts, and in the TV show he actually had her murder someone. So this is Jessica talking to Luke Cage about what it felt like to have her agency stolen from her by the Purple Man. And Luke said, the guy's in jail now, right? She goes, yeah. You put him there, right? No. Well, who did? Everyone but me. Anything you did when you were with him, you can't take the. She goes, I know. He put it in my head. He made me do it. He made me say it. It doesn't have. You don't have to. You don't understand. It doesn't change the fact that I did or I said it. No one understands. They say they do, but they don't. In your head, it doesn't feel any different than when you think it yourself. It feels. Not only does it feel the same, it actually feels better because the command is pure. It's strong. It's there loud and clear. It's almost soothing. In my mind, I can't tell what the difference is between what he made me do or what I said and what I said or did on my own. The only reason I know I wasn't in love with him is that I could say to myself, how could I be? I hate him. That's it. That's how I kept my sanity. How could I be? But that's where it ends. Other than that, it still feels like I was in love with him. I know it's chemical and pheromones, whatever he does to make you do what he wants. I know, but tell a crazy guy, tell a guy he hears voices and sees things and that ain't there. Tell him, hey, crazy. It's just the chemicals in your brain. You're okay. There's nothing there. And he's still gonna see it no matter what. What I like about this is this idea that on the one hand, we can say Kilgrave stole Jessica's agency. On the other hand, we can look at people who have to live in a society that makes them pass, that makes them code switch and be a certain way and say things that they don't feel may be what they want to say, but nonetheless, they feel a sense of stolen agency. And it's not so much that Jessica Jones is a hero per se, much like Deadpool, much like Killmonger. I say she's aware of worlds that others may not be. And she has degrees of freedom. She can jump buildings, she can punch people and do all the things that, typical superheroes can do. But it's not her agency. It's not her expression of herself. And this sense of having your agency constrained or stolen from you by a system that won't accept you expressing yourself, being who you want to be. I see that as a kind of a heroic struggle. I think some of us have been through in our lives where, wait a minute, this is what I want to be, and maybe I just got to go over there so I can be that. Just as a quick aside, what happens to her is that Kilgrave takes over her mind and tells her to attack the Avengers, and she does. She hurts someone, and then a bunch of Avengers attack her, and eventually they realized her mind had been taken over, and they all come and be nice and such. But I just love what that does to Jessica. It puts her on these little heroic ventures, like going to another town as a private investigator to find a young woman who's run away from home, brings her home and find out that her family's crap and say, well, maybe you shouldn't have to live here, right? So it's kind of perhaps a small hero thing, but for me, it's kind of heroic in that you see someone living in a system that they can't control, trying to manage the decisions, the power they have in that space, and finding where they can do things that we would call good. And so that's why I'm a big fan of Jessica Jones.
Love it. I love it. I think there's a through line between all three characters that you guys have talked about, where there is this sense of action that could very well be considered good actions that very well could be considered bad actions. And really the thing that is the crazy concept here of what determines the hero or villain aspect is the introspection of those characters about their own actions. Like, it's really about how do they really feel about what they're doing. And when it's genuine, they come across very much so like, I am the hero of my story because I really mean this. For Jessica, that's the question. Did I mean it or did I not? Was it a suggestion that I was open to because I already felt that way? Or is it possible that you're only able to suggest things to me and I have no, connection to those feelings initially at all? That's such a great question.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what I appreciate that you said, Scott, everything, but when you put good in quotes, I appreciate that because I think that's exactly the point to the point Victor's making and to the point that Leandra made about Deadpool and his realities. Like, when you understand as a marginalized person that the concept of good is rooted in a very specific context that may not be your own, because that context is usually white, male, Eurocentric. Yep. When you get to a place where you can rise above that, which is what I think Killmonger did, which is what I think Jessica Jones did, which is what Deadpool is doing in his like wild, wacky way. It's rising above this idea that this sort of, because this normal is in, what's the word I want to look for, is it's almost like it imprisons people who are marginalized. And so normal is weaponized against people who are minorities, and Jessica Jones obviously as a woman is a minority. And so I think that that, I don't even want to call it strength because I don't want to put it on a hierarchy, but getting to that's almost like integrative awareness, getting to a place where you can say, You know what? This is good because, like, to Victor's point, I said it's good because this is my worldview and this is my reality.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think that's dope. Super dope.
Just to quickly follow up on both of you, those moments psychologically, phenomenologically, where we feel like we're doing this and this is good, those are hard to come by for people who see multiple universes, right?
Yeah.
Because you're always doing it and then you're deconstructing your own thoughts, should I, coulda, woulda. But it's that contrast that really, I think a lot of contemporary heroes are bringing to the fore. Yeah, I'm going to doubt myself most of the time, but I'm going to get to a point, boom, I'm going to do it and I like it. But because I'm who I am, and I'm going to deconstruct it. And heroizing that dichotomy is something I think we see going on a little bit. And I think that's, as you said earlier, Leandra, healthy. I think it's a more robust way to be with different people. So totally in.
Yeah, I love too when you said like the code switching and like feeling like you have to say something. You know, she tries to be the picture perfect hero. Sorry, that was. And what I loved about that too is that one of the things we kind of keep coming back to, like Victor said, is that we have people who see multiple perspectives, multiple realities, and we're trying to figure out what good is, but what there really isn't one. And like, you know, Vanessa said, good has been defined as white, male, heterosexual, cisgender. And if you're good and not that, then you're an anti-hero. And so, and if you're good and you're bucking that, like you said, in the thing, like bucking the system, if you're going against that, you know, that's somehow not good, but it is good. And that creates that struggle you were talking about. I think Jessica Jones really encapsulates, like, you know, Killmonger doesn't struggle with that because he says, no, this is good. This is what is my right. Deadpool doesn't either because he's beyond that. And so I think Jessica Jones is a little bit, that she's able to struggle with that is really healthy. And I think it goes through with all three of them in terms of, if you're trying to save everyone the same way, you're just oppressing people.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
I'm gonna write that down. That's a drop the mic quote.
No, that definitely is solid. Yeah, because if it's one size fits all, you're not taking individuals into account.
Right, and that teaches my students all the time, where I'm like, you know, if you're coming in with a manual for CBT and you're doing it the same way for everyone, you're causing harm. It's oppressive to look at healing and heroism as one thing that's defined in one way, because the truth is we all have our own realities, we all have our experiences, and whether we want to admit it or not, we live in a system where people are marginalized based upon this ideal Captain America heroism, whether it's saving the world or just being a good person. We define in America good person as that. And I think people see Jessica Jones as an alcoholic or a drug user, someone who struggles mentally or is living on the fringe, and she's doing the work, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, on that, another drop mic statement there, we're going to move on to Victor.
Man, you talk about should have gone first. That's me right now. So this is a project that I created through my You Create Comics line. As you can see, if you want to know what You Create Comics is all about, it's behind me this whole time. But this was a project that I wanted to do for urban youth, particularly male youth, to talk about how you can apply concepts that are prevalent in comics to your everyday life structures, things to think about. And for our second week, we were talking about protagonist versus antagonist. Now, as a writer, the concept of protagonist is really the main character of a story. It's the person that undergoes change in the context of a plot. More often than not, that person is considered the good guy. And that's really kind of how I'm using this term very loosely, so that we have that understanding that the protagonist is the good guy. The antagonist, of course, is the situational representation or person that they have to overcome to get to their final goals at the end of the story. So that kind of sets that context for what it means to be a protagonist versus antagonist. And the concept that I was trying to get across is the idea of how perspective plays out when it comes to this. So our theme, determination, the choices we make in life, despite our best intentions, can easily be misconstrued, misinterpreted, or misunderstood. While it's not necessarily feasible to ensure that everyone is aware of your intent with every action, it's the responsibility of the individual to take a stance on matters that are important to them. Furthering that notion is to critically look at how one's actions either fit within their intended outcome, or do they reflect a counterproductive or overtly detrimental perspective to who you're trying to be. And with that, what I'm really getting at is this concept that there are things that we might do that we think even in the moment is good, but we know at our core that it feeds into something else, right? For students in particular, if you're the class clown, the class cut up, you might be the hero to everybody in the room except your teacher. Everyone might love every ounce of what you've done, but your teacher can't stand you. And it's a matter of perspective, right? And so with that, I like to pull this sort of test, if you will, to my fellow panelists here. And I'm just curious as to who you would designate as the protagonist or the antagonist, the hero or the villain. So the first one that I offer every time that I do this, Superman or Lex Luthor, who's the hero and who's the villain? What do you say?
I feel the same way about Superman as I do about Captain America. So.
That's fair. That's fair. That's fair.
I mean, I think it depends on which version of Lex Luthor we're talking about.
Okay. Okay.
I think there are some versions of Lex Luthor that it's almost like Kingpin in and Daredevil. You know, he's got the same goal. He's just got a different way of going about it.
I knew this was the right group to ask this question. That's what I'm talking about.
But,
yes.
You know, but he's like a bald, big dude who's always going after our favorite superhero. So,
right?
You know, we're supposed to think he's a bad guy. I mean, he does do some bad things. I don't know, man. I don't know.
I like that. No. I love the question. The second one that I always follow up with is who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? Professor X or Magneto?
Oh, no. See, this is my box.
Yeah. I'm going there.
If you're pushing me, I'm
going there.
Because Professor X is like the epitome of privilege, boarding schools.
Yep.
We're
Exactly.
rich, got it all going on.
Right?
Magneto is a Holocaust survivor trying to protect his people.
Come on.
Yes.
See, this is what I'm talking about. It's always about perspectives, right?
Yeah.
Because in so many different ways, as you can just break it down, and we've seen it. I almost gave it away before. We've seen the analogy of Professor X and Magneto to Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. And there's a lot of people that feel very strongly against that. Not that it was created with that. I doubt that it absolutely was, but I think over the years, there have been some interweavings of an analog sort that has that conversation that there are two ways to try to go for the same goal, where, you know, Professor X is all about peaceful coexistence and integration. It's fantastic. Let's join hands and we'll love each other and it'll be great. Magneto's like, sure, we can do that, but I'll kill you if I have to in order to get it. Yes.
Professor X did that whole thing to Jean Grey and
talk about it. Yes.
So he basically locked that girl up for the safety of everyone else.
Right.
And
right.
You know, you're talking about like doing something that later contributes to something bigger. Anyway, there you go.
No, because we can double down on that, which I find super interesting. That it's Joss Whedon who wrote the series that the Danger Room became sentient, and Professor X knew it and kept them oppressed until they were able to fight back and become this character Danger that threatened everybody. Again, Charles has a history of doing some very questionable things, particularly when it comes to his mind powers that he knows are better than everybody else's. Even going back to the Superman Lex Luthor question mark, Superman, okay, yes, he is always presented as the hero, but Lex has a point. People are far less self-aware of the dangers that they're in because Superman is there. Right? I will run towards danger because Superman will save me. That is not smart. That is definitely counterproductive to your human existence. Things can fall on you. He is fallible. He can't be everywhere at once. What is wrong with you? As a statement of human evolution, Lex, a self-made man, looks at Superman as, you are a problem. You are a stopgap. We don't have to try as hard because you're here. You are detrimental to our growth as a society, as a people. That is a problem. If you are here to stunt us, you are the villain. These are all the perspectives that these characters offer, but we don't always give them that credence in terms of that truth. One of the things that we saw early on was the idea that to be a hero, there has to be a sense of self risk involved. What self risk is there for Superman? You know, under a yellow sun, he is damn near perfect. Yeah. So how can he define heroism for anybody? You know, there are so many things that he's exempt from: pain, struggle. He can't know what that's like. He barely has to eat or sleep. So there's so many things that he's going to intervene on that he has no real concept of. So how can he truly be a hero to people? And it's always about perspectives. And I think that's the biggest thing that we've talked about in this panel, is that based on perspective, we have to really kind of shed our ideas of the tried and true black and white hero and recognize that, again, as has been echoed many times, it is in your actions every day that you take a choice, make a choice. That's how you define your level of heroism every time. I was just trying to bring it home. I was just trying to bring it home. Let the church say, you know.
What I love about what's going on here is these people that we've talked about, specifically Jessica Jones, Deadpool, and Killmonger. These are people who have lived in the complex realities a lot of people get to avoid, right? And so we're kind of looking at what I would call heroes of the gradient, right? People who have lived in these multiverse realities that we live in and come back and say, no, you don't get to say that that's right.
Right.
Because it's, as you said, it's contextual, it's perspective driven. And I'm kind of excited that we see more stories like this. And I'm interested in what it's going to mean for culture if we really start describing heroism in these more contextual ways as opposed to absolute ways. And the evil scheme is to actually foster a culture devoted to.
Absolutely.
And Victor, the way you just described Superman too, like we can run towards danger because Superman will save us. I was like, that is privilege.
Right?
Superman is the embodiment of privilege. And it's wild because now I think I understand why I hate him so much. Because, and again, and he, and like people with privilege, like he is who he is. And so I think when you think about perspective, Superman is like, I'm sure he has a great burden on his shoulders because of all the things he has to do. And, you know, we see the comparisons of him and like being an immigrant and all these things like, yes, cool. And it's like a both and, like, yes. And I think that is where these sort of other characters that we've talked about, they have embraced that both and Deadpool, I mean, questionable, but I think he's getting there, you know, and that's why I think, again, that's where that complexity comes in. And what you're talking about, Scott, is to be able to have different understandings of what is heroic, what is not, you know what I'm saying? And understand that all of that is contextual, which is the point I think that Victor was making in terms of like, you know, what is situational. Like when you say like, is this person the hero or the villain in what situation? Walking down the street? Like what are we talking about?
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And I think that is something, no shade, that I think that we're lacking in a lot of our conversations around difference now, is that both and philosophy, and really being able to understand that difference is just that. It's not a deficiency. It's just different.
That's right.
Well, that about wraps it up for this discussion. Comic-Con International, thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to share our love of all things geekdom and discuss this important issue of how we can all be heroes. Panelists, please tell the audience where they can find you on social media, and we will start with Victor.
You guys can find me at Vantage In-House on all forms of social media. Please, please, please check out youcreatecomics.com. That's You Create Comics. If you want to check out some of the educational programming that we offer, as well as some of the tools to help you build your own comic book universe from start to finish.
That's fantastic. How about you, Leandra?
Yep, you can find me on Twitter at Paris Leandra, at Parris Leandra. Feel free to reach out if you have questions about schools or equity. If you're a school psych student interested in getting your degree, we need them. We're here. Come over to William and Mary. We have a shortage, so you're guaranteed a job. And some exciting news, the William and Mary School of Education will be hosting a podcast series starting in January called Just Education, where we talk about only education from an equity lens.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yes.
How about you, Vanessa?
So I'm basic. You could just find me on Twitter or Instagram at Dr. Vanessa Hintz, and we could just talk about all the things. You don't even have to be serious. I love horror movies. If anybody wants to talk to me about horror movies, please, no one else wants to talk to me about it. So please just hit me up. Not anybody, everyone here will.
Okay, I was about to be like,
my family, they don't want to talk about it. They think it's weird. So please, someone talk to me about all the scary movies at Dr. Vanessa Hintz.
That's fantastic. You can find me on Twitter at @dark_loops and on YouTube and Facebook at Dark Loops Productions. Also, if you type ReggieCon, all one word, Into the Google machine, you'll find a virtual con series I co-organize. It's sponsored by Enrollment Management at Illinois State University. My colleagues here on the panel have participated in RegieCon in the past, and every month we celebrate a History Heritage Month being celebrated nationally by discussing a piece of pop culture that addresses that month's issue. So there it is, from all of us to all of you. Big hugs, and remember, we can be heroes.
heroes.
Bye-bye.